heartbroken mother who's talking for the first time since Theresa's disappearance nearly 3 weeks ago. She's giving us new insight into Theresa's marriage with husband Christopher, who is now a person of interest in this case.
Tonight, we're getting a never-before-seen look inside the police investigation into the disappearance of Theresa Lockhart.
The police say her husband, Christopher Lockhart, killed himself in October and left behind a written confession with directions where to find his wife's body.
Morning. The missing Michigan teacher who was found dead last month was likely strangled to death. That's according to a medical examiner in Allegan County.
It started like any other Tuesday night in the quiet suburb of Portage, Michigan. Theresa Lockhart, a high school Spanish teacher known for her kindness and dedication, simply vanished. No calls, no texts, no goodbyes. She was just gone. Friends grew worried. Police searched everywhere. Her husband, Christopher Lockhart, told a familiar story. She went out and never came back. But the way he said it, the gaps in his timeline, and the odd calm in his voice, it didn't sit right. For 5 long months, the community held on to hope. Then, a single confession letter shattered it all. This isn't just a case about a missing woman. It's about the darkness that can hide in the person you think you know best. In Chapter 1, we will dive deep into the chilling case of Theresa Lockhart, a beloved teacher whose sudden disappearance in 2017 left her community in shock. We'll walk through the days leading up to her vanishing, the search efforts that followed, the unsettling behavior of her husband, and the heartbreaking twist that revealed what really happened. Theresa Lockhart was the kind of person who left an impression on everyone she met. Born and raised in Michigan, she had a deep love for language and culture, which led her to become a high school Spanish teacher in the Portage area. Her students adored her, not just because she made learning fun, but because she truly cared about them. She would spend extra time helping struggling kids, organize cultural events, and even check in on students outside of class. Outside of work, Theresa loved the outdoors. She enjoyed hiking, gardening, and quiet weekends spent reading. Friends described her as warm, patient, and always smiling. She had been married to Christopher Lockhart for years, and on the outside, their life together seemed steady. But as those closest to Theresa would later learn, appearances can be dangerously deceiving. Christopher Lockhart was a retired U.S. Army veteran who had served for more than 2 decades. To the outside world, he was disciplined, dependable, and proud of his service. He lived in Portage, Michigan, and had a seemingly stable life after retiring from the military. However, beneath that composed exterior, there were troubling signs. Friends and neighbors later recalled that Christopher could be controlling and quick-tempered, especially in private settings. He was known to keep to himself, often avoiding deep social interactions unless it was necessary. After retirement, he appeared restless, struggling to adapt to civilian life and the slower pace that came with it. While there was no public record of major prior incidents before Theresa's disappearance, those close to the couple would later note that Christopher's personality could shift from charming and polite to brooding and distant in an instant. When Theresa and Christopher first met, their relationship seemed like a match between 2 stable, career-driven individuals. Theresa admired his discipline and commitment, while Christopher appreciated her kindness and intelligence. But over time, small cracks began to show. Friends noticed that Christopher often dominated conversations, interrupting Theresa or speaking on her behalf. There were hints that disagreements behind closed doors could become heated, though Theresa rarely spoke about it openly. She valued privacy and may have downplayed problems to protect their image. Some colleagues later recalled that she occasionally arrived at work looking unusually tense or distracted. Christopher, on the other hand, became increasingly protective or possessive, depending on who you asked. This subtle but growing imbalance in their marriage was never addressed publicly, but in hindsight, those early signs suggested a relationship where control was quietly shifting in one direction. Friday, May 18, 2017, started like any other spring morning in Portage, Michigan. Theresa woke up early, got ready for work, and left the house around her usual time. She was wearing a light-colored blouse and dark pants, her work bag slung over her shoulder. Co-workers later said she seemed calm and in good spirits that day. She taught her classes, graded assignments, and chatted briefly with a colleague about weekend plans. Sometime after school ended, Theresa left work and headed home. Security cameras caught her car pulling into the driveway in the late afternoon. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Neighbors later reported hearing nothing unusual that evening, no loud arguments, no signs of a struggle. Around 6 p.m., Christopher was seen walking outside, appearing relaxed, though no one spotted Theresa with him. That night, Christopher's Facebook posts were odd. He shared quotes and short updates that didn't seem connected to anything specific. There's no clear record of where he went or what he did later that night. Theresa's phone activity stopped sometime after she arrived home, and no one heard from her again. The following day, Saturday, she missed a social commitment, something her friend said was completely unlike her. Calls went straight to voicemail. By Sunday, she failed to show up for work-related duties, raising even more concern. When co-workers contacted Christopher, he claimed Theresa had stormed off after an argument. He didn't file a missing person report right away, saying he expected her to cool off and return. But those closest to her knew this explanation didn't fit her character. From the moment she stepped into her home on May 18th, the warm, dependable teacher, who had never simply disappeared from her life, vanished without a trace. On Monday, May 22nd, a concerned colleague contacted the Portage Department of Public Safety to report that Theresa had not been at work for several days without explanation. This prompted police to visit the Lockhart residence. Christopher was there and told officers that Theresa had left on Friday night after an argument, taking only her purse and leaving her car behind. From the beginning, investigators noted inconsistencies in his statements. While he claimed she was simply away, he could not give any leads on where she might have gone. Authorities found no evidence of planned travel, and Theresa's personal items, including her car, phone, and identification, were still at home. In the early weeks, police conducted neighborhood canvasses, checked local hospitals, and searched nearby wooded areas. Flyers were distributed, and her case was featured in local news broadcasts. Christopher cooperated minimally, declining to participate in volunteer searches and avoiding most media inquiries. The Portage police publicly labeled the case a missing person investigation, but privately, suspicion was mounting. Detectives knew Theresa was deeply committed to her students and her job, making it unlikely she would vanish voluntarily. By mid-June, with no sightings, no financial activity, and a husband who seemed more evasive than concerned, the case took on a more ominous tone. As weeks passed, police dug deeper. A few neighbors came forward with home security footage from around May 18th. One camera showed Christopher driving a silver SUV late at night, hours after he claimed to be asleep. The SUV's trunk looked oddly weighed down. Another clip caught him walking from the garage with what appeared to be large, heavy trash bags, his head low, moving quickly. These weren't things anyone saw from him before. Investigators also spotted strange activity on his phone records. Sudden late-night trips to remote areas, calls cut short, and long periods where his phone was turned off. While none of it was direct proof, the pattern was troubling. It painted a picture, one where Christopher might not just be a worried husband, but someone hiding something very serious. By July, the investigation into Theresa's disappearance was quietly heating up, but so was Christopher's own list of problems. He wasn't just on the police's radar for his wife's case. He was also facing unrelated legal trouble. Old charges, including embezzlement from a previous job, were coming back to haunt him. Court dates piled up and his behavior became more erratic. Neighbors noticed he rarely left his house during the day but seemed to take short, unexplained drives at night. Once, he was seen returning with mud on his shoes despite dry weather. In August, police pulled him over for a minor traffic violation. What should have been routine ended with his arrest after officers discovered he had violated bond conditions from an older case. His Facebook posts also grew stranger. Cryptic quotes, sudden expressions of love for Theresa, and vague references to the truth coming out. Friends couldn't tell if it was guilt, grief, or something darker. Police, meanwhile, were connecting dots. Inconsistencies in his alibi, unexplained cash withdrawals, and surveillance placing him in unusual locations after May 18th. By September, it was clear. Christopher Lockhart was no longer just the husband of a missing woman, he was a prime suspect. On October 24, 2017, everything took a dark and sudden turn. Christopher Lockhart didn't show up for work at the Portage Public Schools Transportation Department. Concerned co-workers called police for a welfare check. When officers arrived at his Portage home, the place was locked up and there was no answer at the door. What they found inside was shocking. Christopher was dead, hanging in the basement. He had taken his own life, but this wasn't the only thing officers found. On the table near him, there were several neatly stacked papers. These weren't just random notes. It was a confession. In the letter, Christopher admitted what everyone had feared for months. He had killed his wife, Theresa. He wrote that the two had gotten into an argument on May 18th, and he had snapped, strangling her in the heat of the moment. He detailed how he wrapped her body and hid it in a remote wooded area, away from their home. The note even included directions and step-by-step instructions on where to find her. Police immediately acted on this information. Following Christopher's map, detectives drove out to a rural area in Allegan County. The directions led them to a heavily wooded spot off a dirt road, an isolated place far from any houses. There, under a pile of leaves and debris, they found human remains. Forensic teams quickly confirmed what the note had already told them. It was Theresa. After 5 long months of questions, rumors, and hope fading day by day, the truth had finally come out, but it came at a cost. Theresa's family had to face the crushing reality of how her life ended, and the man who could have answered their questions, who could have been tried in court, was gone. The case had an ending, but no justice. When Theresa's body was found, the medical examiner's office took over to determine what had happened to her. The remains were in a shallow grave in the woods, and because months had passed since her disappearance, the body was badly decomposed. This made it difficult to get every answer, but the autopsy still told a clear enough story. The examiner confirmed that Theresa's death was a homicide. They found evidence which suggested that she was choked to death. There was damage to her neck area, broken bones in the throat structure, and no signs of accidental injury. There were no drugs or alcohol in her system, which ruled out an overdose or impairment. The report also gave details on the condition of her burial site. The grave was hastily covered with little care to hide the grave. This matched the idea of a quick, panicked disposal rather than a planned concealment. While the medical examiner couldn't determine the exact time of death, the findings, in fact, lined up with the night she was last seen alive, which was the same night Christopher's story began to fall apart. News of Theresa's recovery and Christopher's confession shook everyone who knew them. Her family was heartbroken, but they finally had answers after months of pain and uncertainty. They remembered Theresa as a warm, kind person who was deeply dedicated to her students. Vigils were held in her honor, with candles lighting up the night in the small Michigan community. Friends and neighbors spoke about her love for teaching, her laughter, and how she always made time for others. Schools in the area held moments of silence, and students shared handmade cards and flowers. The tragedy also left many stunned that such darkness had been hidden in plain sight. While the pain would never fully leave, her loved ones found comfort in remembering the joy she brought. With Christopher's death, there would be no trial, no cross-examination, and no direct answers to the many questions left behind. Investigators were confident in the confession note and supporting evidence, but they still wished they could have heard the truth from him in person. They reflected on the challenges of the case, how Christopher's calm behavior in public had masked deeper problems. The case also raised concerns about how domestic issues can escalate without outsiders realizing it. Law enforcement hoped it would encourage earlier reporting of suspicious or troubling behavior. Though justice in the traditional sense couldn't be served, investigators took some closure in giving Theresa's family the truth about what happened. Still, for those who knew the couple, parts of the story would always remain a mystery. Theresa's story is a heartbreaking reminder that danger can hide behind even the most ordinary smiles. A beloved teacher, a caring friend, a woman full of life. Her light was taken far too soon. Christopher's final act revealed the truth, but it also showed how much can be hidden until it's too late. If you or someone you know is facing controlling or harmful behavior, don't wait. Speak out, reach for help, and trust your instincts. We share these stories not just to remember the victims, but to help prevent future tragedies. Theresa's legacy should be one of awareness, courage, and kindness. What are your thoughts on the tragic case of Theresa Lockhart? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story important, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others so her voice and others like hers will never be forgotten. Your support is greatly appreciated. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next episode.